Have you ever found yourself watching a movie, TV show, anime, or even playing a video game and thinking to yourself, hey, the music in this is pretty dope. I wish I had composed this or thought of that. With that being said, we're talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. After 10 years since the first Guardians movie came out, and especially knowing that this is going to be the last iteration of this Guardians theme, I can't really say that I'm anything but excited for this last and third movie. I think it's pretty obvious that I'm an MCU fan, but I'm also a James Gunn fan. I've been a fan of his since I was a kid with the live-action Scooby-Doo movies. I think he has a nice sensibility to blend in humor with very heavy and emotional topics and subjects. I am in the group of people who is very excited to see what James Gunn has in store for all the DC Universe plans. Even though he has worked with multiple composers, I wonder what I would have figured out instead. Where a hypothetical James Gunn hypothetically hires me to compose this hypothetical theme for the Guardians 3. I know, I think it's a bit of a stretch too. But I'm even less trying to infer that I would do work or anything in any way better or superior than any of the composers or even compositions that we mentioned. This is purely a fun thought process exercise that I thought to share with you guys. I thought I'd make it a little bit more challenging and a little bit more fun for you guys. Because the role of the composer isn't to just selfishly accompany the movie or the TV show simply with any piece of music that he thinks fits the vibe of the movie. Many of the times it is the director's job to tell the composer what sort of vibe it is they're looking for, or even sometimes what genre and orchestration, and even tempo. So I decided to mimic that a little bit here. So the way I thought we could do this is to spin the wheel. Ooh. Okay, we got heavenly. I'm going to start thinking on notes and what could have a heavenly quality. Whenever I have any stuff worked out, I'll come back to you guys. Okay, so about a week has gone by. I wasn't expecting it to take so long. Things were just super busy at work, so I kind of struggled with making up like specific, definite time to just work on this. But the cool part is, it wasn't exactly due to lack of ideas. I'm sure many of you guys started thinking to yourselves, okay, so how are we going to make a movie about superheroes that are like a band of misfits in space? And we kind of have to represent what they stand for in a heavenly way. Heavenly music usually has like a bunch of choirs, mostly diatonic chord progression, so no fancy chords or key modulations that are like super out there and noticeable, and I'm sure some of you guys could make that work amazingly, and if so, please post your intent and share it with us. But I personally wasn't feeling like having something that's very slow and drony was the sort of thing that fit the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I swear to God, my first thought to like achieve something that sounds kind of heavenly was to think like, okay, what's the opposite of something that sounds heavenly? It's kind of a cliche, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, if it doesn't sound heavenly, it should sound kind of hellish, right? So cue the drum roll and the memes, but what sounds hellish? The tritone. But that's just really a bunch of mumbo jumbo to think that one specific interval is going to have some sort of devilish connection. Because if you think about it, that sort of tritone interval used like over a major chord, like used over a D major chord, gives you this Lydian sound. And that Lydian sound is usually associated with very dreamy and mystical qualities, and I thought maybe that could be our heavenly thing. Since we are talking about a group of superheroes, I usually try to refrain from using the just basic superhero chords. In the key of D, the superhero chords would be to start somewhere around D, then to move to like a B flat major chord, and then usually something that would take you to G major or just play a G major chord. And then you either come back to D or you use a dominant chord like a backdoors resolution with a C, or just an A major chord to do like a 5-to-1 resolution. You've heard what I like to call these the superhero chords in many superhero themes like... The composer for both Guardians movies has been Tyler Bates. I've also been a fan of his for a while, not only because he was involved with many movies with Zack Snyder, like Watchmen, 300, Dawn of the Dead, but also Deadpool 2, Atomic Blonde, Pearl, X, John Wick movies, but he's also like me and many of you guys watching this video, seriously good guitar player, seriously good tone, and if at this point you still doubt his skills, taking in consideration he has both produced, song written for, and played live with Marilyn Manson, I don't think he has anything to prove for. And even in the score for Guardians of the Galaxy, the main theme composed by Tyler Bates also has those superhero chords. So even though my original idea was to hide from those chords, I started thinking, what if we use those chords, but we focus on that tritone, that sharp fourth, to get that Lydian sound throughout the progression, and then we mix it in with other heavenly qualities. So I started jamming some ideas, and in the key of D, if we go again for that Lydian D major with a sharp 11 or a sharp 4, that tritone, you get something like this. That index finger over there being the sharp 4, and I think I pretty much immediately got this idea. And to be honest, that isn't a very polished idea, but it was something to get us started with. And this is a very important tip that I have for all of you guys, which is even if you guys don't have something that works 100% when you're doing your own song or something like that, record it a little bit, just trying to hash ideas down. I wasn't really worried on trying to compose something that was like very playable by an orchestra. Then later on during the process we can figure out if there's something we need to change or not. There isn't really a right or wrong. I come in here and just start thinking of melodies and then trying to notate them or just write them down in MIDI files. I'm much more of a mouse and keyboard sort of composer. I don't own like a piano MIDI keyboard, but I'm also not very good at playing the keys, so I would probably just struggle a little bit to work on the ideas. I'm only really using 2 plugins. I'm not using too many channels because I was trying to do something simple. I'm using the Albion 1 from Spitfire Audio that has a bunch of orchestral sounds, including some like heavy hitting percussion. Then I'm using the plain old Omnisphere for keys and synths, choirs and stuff like that. Taking the idea that we had before, I just laid out that chord progression. In this case I just transposed it to A. The chords are about A sharp 11, F sharp 11, D sharp 11, and I think we come back to F sharp 11. So this is what just the strings sound like. Which sound alright by themselves, but then I started thinking, what if we can do a bit of a call and response thing between different instrument families? Not only would it fit well, because in this case we're doing like a theme that is supposed to represent a team, a group of characters. If you do them in a specific way that matches the tone of the characters, specific instrument groups can really represent individual members of the team when you have like an overall group theme with like the whole orchestra. It's not really something new, separate the brass from the strings. I really like it in stuff like Star Wars and like Leia's theme, so I tried to do that here, have like a call and response between the strings and the brass over there. Brass and horn section. I like the low end to be a bit more nasty, so I ended up with something like this. I went for like a really long reverb for the horns this time. I rarely go this heavy on horns, but I felt like for the vibe that we were going for, again, very heavenly, very regal, it just matched the vibe in this case. I was feeling pretty okay with that, so then it was just a matter of adding things. So if we put everything together, the prototype for an idea sounded about this. The horns that are being helped out here by the woodwinds, and having the choir that gives us like a good foundation. The choirs that are doing something similar to the strings and something similar to the horns, but they're doing something a bit different. And I didn't go for like ahs or oohs. I specifically went for a more like sound. It has a more like meditative sort of quality I felt like would add to the vibe. I purposely went for something that kind of sounds like disconnected, like not all the voices are entering and leaving the chords and sustained notes at the same time, because even though this is a working team of heroes, each character has a very strong personality, and even though they are a family, they fight like families do, and they're very much heroes and people trying to do the right thing, but you know, they're kind of rebel-y and hide their emotions between jokes and doing even things that they don't believe are right because it's just easier. So that kind of disconnected nature between the different characters and between the different instruments was something that I thought was important to represent through the theme. And it was just a matter of adding a little bit of rhythm to it, so we have like the more staccato strings in unison with the woodwinds, giving us a little bit of a different flavor, trying to outline the chords we had mentioned before. On the rhythm section here, a bunch of percussion sounds. Easter Island sort of percussion. More percussion. More percussion. the typical gongs and cymbals with both swells and one-hit strikes. I started out with something simple, then later on we do add more stuff. I didn't want something that was too messy, but I also didn't want just something that was like a rock beat, like kick on 1 and then snare on 3. Obviously this idea is very unpolished. There's like basically no automation, there's no compressors or EQs or anything like that. I was just trying to get something basic out here. And then I moved out to have like an actual idea of like what would a whole track dedicated to what the Guardians are all about sound like. Usually the struggle of a composer isn't really to compose a lot of music when music is done. Yeah, that can be a pain, but it's usually to figure out what is the sort of language that you're talking in a movie. What is the basic vibe of the movie? Like, yeah, we have that theme, but like if we wanted to do an action scene, what would an action scene sound like? Or if it was a more comedic sort of a scene, you still want to incorporate those themes and those motifs, but what would that sort of thing sound like? What is the sort of sound, musical language and vocabulary that we're going to speak in this movie? So I knew I wanted to have like a pad sound and having some like lower woodwinds just to like add a little bit of extra dimension. It's pretty much the same chords as before, and then it evolves from that, from having the pizzicato strings, adding a little bit of an extra dimension, because with just the pads, you can get a little bit of like how the tempo moves, but you don't really get a very rhythmic quality to it. So this is how it sounds when we get the rhythm going. And I didn't just want to do like a simple cliche rhythm to it, because again, since these guys are a team that they work together, they are a family, but they're all working in their own funky ways because they have their own different personalities. They all come from a different place. Some of them are raccoons, others are talking trees, some are humans, and others are aliens, others are robots. So it really adds character to your theme and music if you do like go out of your way to do something that's a bit different and then mash it down together cohesively in a thought. I was thinking of this in 4/4, so if I play this part with the metronome, all the different parts aren't hitting in the beat. I'm kind of doing that like Mission Impossible 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2. Is that in 5/4 or is that in 4/4 with like different measures? Who knows? And that's part of the fun of it. Until the percussion starts, you can't really tell. We have here in the keys just like more kind of artificially, but in a good way, crystally sounding piano sort of a thing. I decided for us to add a little bit of rhythm with something that sounded nice, something sweet, pretty much just copy the main theme of it, but added a little bit of different rhythm to it. And the percussion out here, a little bit of extra oomph, and it's really low in the mix. It's something simple, doing almost like a heartbeat sort of a sound. Nice and pretty, isn't overly complicated. After that, we start raising it up a notch, strings and woodwinds, and the choirs enter along. I pretty much just copy-pasted the part of the hordes that we had before and molded it up a little bit so that it just sounded a bit different, so that the listener can be consuming the movie for the first time and not necessarily recognize that things are the same theme or that they sound similar or not, but so that subconscious, it all fits together and molds into a nice little frame of reference. Nothing like extremely out of the ordinary happens here. You get this more like tic-tac percussion thing going on just to get a little bit of an extra dimension to the rhythm. The horns come in. If you notice the melody here, it isn't just some simple melody. I specifically wanted to do something that sounded hero-ish, but had a connection to the rest of the universe. Over the context of everything that's happening, these funky chords, these glassy-like pianos, all these weird offbeat strings, you wouldn't expect a hero sound out of this. And I started thinking, well, this is the MCU, so something heroic would be the Avengers theme. So if you start thinking of something like the Avengers theme, down, 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 down. It's kind of what we're doing here, just slower, and instead of like hitting the high note, down, 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 we're going like down, 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 down. And it purposely goes down to be like, this is a contrast to what a traditional hero would do. True heroes would go rise up to the problem and show up that they're there and support the people, while these dudes are kind of like, well, we're here, but kind of could just like fly away and leave this for the proper authorities. I know as the movies go on and characters get developed in specific ways, obviously they become more in tune with their hero selves. But even then, I think it was nice to give this like different version, different idea to what this theme could really be about. Other than that, things stay more or less the same. The horns evolve like the same way that in the team, when someone does something heroic, usually the others end up joining in, so that was represented here in the horns, where I start with a single horn line, and then it gets harmonized, you know? So to keep things interesting, because clearly this is a disconnected and not well-jointed team of characters, and a questionable team of sorts, what if we do a key change to represent the spat-out idea of being like, oh, we're doing this, oh wait, we can do that over there, oh, has anyone looked over there? Rapid key changes or chord changes could be cool, but because it would kind of break the immersion of the heavenly quality, we'll do a key change and then we'll just add more stuff in like the main part of the theme so that we can have a different vibe. It goes very abruptly, like the team usually goes if they're not working together properly. So we go a whole step up from the key of A to the key of B. Nothing too dramatic, but enough to get your attention. Just a nice little key change, and it is in that part that we go for like the main hero section. At the end, I'll try to do a montage with different scenes so that you get an idea of how these themes would go, but this part next is supposed to be the first time you actually hear this team coming together, and you get like the first rounding up Avengers theme in the fight of New York. You hear like nods to that theme throughout the movie. This is like the first time it hits you impactfully. That's this part of our arrangement. Pretty simple chorus-like idea, pretty much copy-pasted from before, just added a little bit of extra percussion to give this part way more detail compared to like the verse build-up. You really want your chorus-like section to explode. We have the keyboard, kind of a mix mash of both sections, but pretty much just the strings part. It doesn't really matter what I think, because in this hypothetical scenario, I would have to present this to our hypothetical James Gunn, and he would give me directions, but having this sort of language and vocabulary helps. I'm biased because I've done this, but I do feel like it was a successful way to add up the heavenly quality that we were looking for. The thing that you can do that's really easy is to just go around and change the tempo markings for the song. So in this case, I'm generally moving around the 80 BPM mark, but at some points I feel like, hey, the song would be nicer if there was like a little bit of a rest feeling, or like in that more actiony scene, raise itself a little bit up. So go into your DAW and make it so that the tempo is not linear. In this case, there's plenty of times where the tempo raises up. It goes like up to 84 BPM, starts around 73 BPM. So that's like a 10 BPM range. You don't really need to be limited to one tempo. And it kind of helps add this organic feeling to your compositions if you do change the tempo up a little bit, depending on the mood of the song. For this next section, what I was envisioning was a sort of B theme. And this B theme would be very important so that we can have like a very actiony scene. One of those moments where there's a lot going on and you want something that's more on the simple sort of music, just accompany things, or like when there's a more regal moment going on, but you want to keep the heavenly vibe. What can we do? What about a dropout where it's just a choir? And then we build on top of it with many as motifs, so that if there was a comedy scene and we needed something more jokey, we can use different ideas from the different instruments. This is what we get for when it gets for that dropout. try to like evoke the sharp 4 too much this time. I was just following the chords, which I think in this case are like D major, C major, G, and B flat, kind of in like a key rock and rollish sort of a thing, which again is also important. Peter Quill listens to a lot of 80s music, a lot of like rock and roll music, soul music, funk music, and they have these sorts of chords, so it was nice to like add that a little bit into the theme. This actually looks pretty neat and stuff, but this wasn't originally here. Originally, the section that I had arranged was this. If we move up to the further section. I didn't even remember how it actually sounded. It actually sounds pretty cool. But the problem was, I spent like a big amount of time doing this, like 45 minutes, and I was like, this is pretty cool. But then I started thinking, I'm missing the point. This doesn't sound heavenly. So I had to pull up my big boy pants and be like, this is cool, but this is going up to the end of the track because this is not something I can use. Maybe it could be like a villain theme, who knows? But for like representing our main group of characters, this doesn't fit. This part here fits this vibe better, and it's much more interesting and engaging for the heavenly vibe that we were looking. Always have that focus in mind, guys. When you're doing something like this, you can switch up with the vibes. Like sometimes the sadder songs are the ones that have like happy chords. Do mess up with things, do like look around, figure out what things you can change, what things you cannot change, but always keep in mind when you have a restriction, when you have a vibe going on, when you have something that you want to achieve, keep that in mind. Don't forget about it like I did in this case, and then it kind of fucked me up a little bit. We have the choir. Pretty similar chords to the ones we had before, just a couple of differences here and there so that everything just doesn't sound the same. The strings here are really the jumping point of this part, where they do the long sustaining notes, keeping with like the more disjointed part of like, sometimes there are like 4 instruments, sometimes there are 5, sometimes there are 6. With the horns I wanted to do something different, more jokey, more comedic, like the little organ does the chords as well. While that is going on, you have the pizzicato strings. Adding that like percussive layer to it, the piano helping. Percussion just helping define the backbeat. Then after this, we go much more heavily into like a more actiony scene, like more tense, so that in the end we can indeed go back to our safe spot. This part, the chords become a little bit different. Phrygian-y thing, harmonic minor-y. We go for a little bit more of different key changes, and it's mostly simple chords going around. Most of the instruments stay doing the same thing. The piano here. The strings become lower in pitch so that they give you that oomph of tension, like, oh, what's going to happen? This might be dangerous. Tremolo strings just doing their thing. To add a little bit of like extra mystic-y, scary, tension-y vibe. And you can argue that this part doesn't sound as heavenly as before, but we're doing a movie. Not every part is going to be happy and jolly. The point is like to drag us across this story. Oh my god, is this character going to perish? Is this the end of this character? You're getting this like very emotional moment, very tense, with all these minor chords switching together between key changes, and then wait, turns out, no, everything is fine because your heroes are here to save the day. Like, just like this. At the end, for for the last chorus, for the last thematic purpose, we can end just a little bit above where we started, and we finish out the key of C. It's a nice way to just complete things and give us that little extra lift. I would never in my own ideas think like, how would I do a cool song that would represent thematically a group of superheroes that are kind of like a band of misfits that become their own family, up in space with aliens and a raccoon and a talking tree. That sounds heavenly. I wouldn't go that way, but I would be lying if I didn't say that I'm very proud of how this sounds, and you know, in another circumstance, I might even take this idea and like sketch it out and make a full song, make a full other idea. I would think it would be really cool. I'm sure you guys could figure out like way more cool, fun, and engaging ideas, and even better sounding ideas. If you guys want to try this out on your own, do it and put it in the comment section or tag me on Instagram and share it, because I'll share it too, because I'm very interested to see like anyone develop their own creative skills with a silly idea like this one. So let's put it all together and end this project for a little bit. If you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, turn on notifications, leave a comment, do all those cool things. If you guys have any ideas for other sorts of movies and themes that you guys would like me to do, let me know. Without further ado, I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!